Thank you, Dr. Ackerman. I want to first recognize my co-authors, Buddy Henson, one of my colleagues, the scientist that really did the heavy lifting on this particular research projects. Dr. Ackerman, who was asking all the hard questions from the field, so we got him involved to help us. And also I'd like to thank him for providing the path whereby we come here and really provide some exposure to the veterinary community, which I think is very much needed. And then Dr. Roger Main, who was a valuable consultant to the project, but then also provided some financial support. I mean, we killed a lot of pigs and took a lot of serum and blood samples that had to be analyzed, and Dr. Main cut us some slack on the cost of that, which was very much appreciated. So here's my outline going forward. We're going to look at some vitamin fortification levels. Some of this was well covered by Dr. Leman, so I will be able to go through this pretty fast. Some variations in observed feed analytics was just confusing us like no end, and I don't know that I have any solutions there. Impact of various feeding levels on live performance and tissue analysis is the bulk of what we're going to be talking about. Comparison of those to actual reference values, and the reference values will be referenced from Iowa State Diagnostic Lab. So when we get to that point, you'll know it. And then some next steps, which I hope you can help me with. This is I want to go really right past that because Dr. Leman covered all that. NRC requirements, there are requirements. There's no nutrient allowances reported there. A lot of the research has been done many years ago, except for the recent ones that he quoted. And so I think it's just a real devoid of information in the literature regarding vitamins and their requirements. And I'm glad that he covered that so I can keep moving. Has anything changed? This is obvious, isn't it? Rearing conditions have changed. We moved pigs indoors. And there's increase in productivity at all phases of production, which has the direct correlation to the potential for increased or some changes in vitamin, probably increase in vitamin requirements by the pig today. And so when are vitamin analysis done? Well, if you want to, you take a feed sample and check for quality. That's happens somewhat, but more often than not, it's when production problems occur in the field. And folks like Dr. Ackerman and his colleagues are asking questions, trying to do a differential diagnosis. Feed is always included in that, along with other production issues. And so those samples are taken are sent off to diagnostic labs. Sometimes it's related to broken bones, downers, or sudden deaths. There'll be analysis for vitamin A, D, and E. And then the University Diagnostic Lab gets involved, and then they bring forward a value or some values that help us understand, first the veterinarian, and then the nutritionist will get involved, whether there could be some problems with the amount of levels that have been provided by the feed. And so that's when a vitamin analysis are normally done. And then what really ramped this up from an issue point of view was late in 2017 there were some global changes in vitamin supply. There was a increase in environmental regulations from China, in which the suppliers of vitamins, most of those were in China. They had to shut down some production in order to correct those regulations, and then production facilities fires in Europe. And so there was a lot of things happening globally that decreased the amount of vitamins that were available. And so consequently, you reduce the supply, prices go up, and lots of increases in prices, particularly as it relates to vitamin A and vitamin E, and somewhat in vitamin D. And so at the same time, if there were production issues that were in the field, then the questions, these are legitimate questions that were being asked. Are observed production issues related to the vitamin crisis? In other words, there's what is the industry trying to respond to this higher prices of vitamins? Are concentrations of straight vitamins from our valued vitamin suppliers, are they being changed due to the supply to try to stretch out the vitamins? Are nutrition suppliers reducing vitamin supplementation? Nutrition suppliers like us, were we trying to reduce vitamin supplementations in order to stretch the supply? And I would have to say that in our investigation as a company, we would say no to all of those. So if that's not the case, then if not, then why is the variation analysis of vitamin source? Why is there a variation in vitamin analysis of vitamin sources in complete feed? Why were these variations occurring when we took samples from the field? Why were they occurring? And then what is behind the discrepancies in reference values in liver, serum, and liver ranges observed levels when both sick and healthy pigs? So what was happening is the production issues were occurring. Samples were taken in both sick and healthy pigs. Serum and liver values were evaluated, and we were not meeting the reference values, which raised all kinds of questions. Okay. And so we decided, our company decided that rather than hide, we decided to get involved and invest in trying to add to some knowledge to the industry, or at least answer some questions, or begin to start generating some questions that all you folks can help us answer. So we went back and looked at, started doing some analyses of our pure vitamin. We call them vitamin fortifiers, which is basically bringing all the vitamins together into one package. That's what we call a fortifier. And we evaluated those. We took some samples of some small inclusion rate VTMs. We also took some grow finish based mixes and some sow based mixes. So you notice that with each level, there's an increase in the inclusion rate. So there's more dilution going on with each of these. Okay? And then we sent all of these analysis off to the Iowa State Veterinary Diagnostic Lab, and they did some values, and we brought those values back, and we compared them to what we expected in the formulas. And so what you're going to see next is expressed as percent of expected in the next graph. So I'll give you time to evaluate that. But basically what's happening here is that if you look at the nursery fortifier, the sow fortifier, the sow vitamins, sow-based mix, grow finish, and a sow-based mix, we looked at all of those. You notice that generally speaking, the vitamin A wasn't meeting the expected percent recovery. Very rarely met across all of these. Vitamin D was pretty good in the high in concentration products, but as you dilute it down, it gets less and less and less recovery. And then vitamin E was, for the most part, always meeting and exceeding the expected amounts in formula, except for this one here, and that's a really old sample. And so we lost all the vitamin E in that particular sample, is what our conclusion was. So as a kind of a summary of all of that analyses, there seems to be wide ranges in percent recovery. The vitamin A consistently was lower than what we'd expected. The vitamin D reduced as product size increased, as we diluted the product, and other ingredients came in and could potentially impact the availability of those vitamin D. It seemed to decrease. And vitamin E was consistently high except for that one old sample. Vitamin A and E are consistent regardless of dilution. So it seemed to be the vitamin D was affected by dilution, but vitamin A and E was not in our study here. And then we asked the question, well, maybe maybe there's lab-to-lab variation. We kind of knew that from other evaluations, so we thought we would check it here. And so we sent the two samples, low inclusion rate vitamin trace mineral mix, a 4-pound inclusion, and a 40-pound grow finish base mix, and we sent it to 4 different labs. Look at that variation. You think we weren't frustrated with that? That doesn't tell us anything. And these are respectable labs. And now, the techniques may have been a little different. I understand all of that. Now, you said, well, you didn't do a very good job sampling or separating. That's what you would say. But I can assure you that we took a splitter, and we did this to the best of our ability, sent both of those products to 4 different labs, and we got those results. And so our conclusion was that base mix and VTM analyses were a waste of resources. And I think Dr. Steve Dritz at K-State has come to that same conclusion as well. About the same time we were doing this, we consulted with him, and he had that same opinion. So our suggestion from a feed industry point of view and from a company's point of view is that you check out your suppliers, make sure they're good. I mean, you have to check them out and make sure that they're meeting their standards, and that's the place to start. And if you have to check them, at least those are more, and that and the straight concentrates are probably more readily analyzed by laboratories. And then after that, you make sure that you've got the correct amount that's being added to the feed and your mix and delivery was done correctly. And you would then assume that those vitamins are there and they're there at the level that we formulated. Maybe you don't want to assume that, but that's the approach that we're taking. And I think we need to be, as a feed industry and as United Animal Health, we're cognizant that there are potential vitamin issues. We're not putting our head in the sand. But we also want the industry to help us understand that there are other factors affecting performance and health, and those should be considered as well. All right. So let's look at the impact of various feeding levels on live performance and tissue analyses. This is the bulk of what we're going to talk about here. So when production anomalies arose in the field from Dr. Ackerman and his colleagues' practice, the serum and liver analyses from both sick and healthy pigs were usually sent in to the diagnostic lab. And all of these analyses came back well below the reference values. Almost all of them. And so the question that came from Dr. Ackerman, which we were having trouble understanding, is what is causing these low results? And so it really begged the question then, does the feeding of various vitamin inclusion levels impact animal performance? If they are lower, does it really matter to the pig? Can we, as far as performance goes, can serum or liver vitamin levels be altered with various levels of inclusion rate? And I'll give you a little preview. Yes, they can be. And I'll show you some data to support that. And in our reference values accurate with today's genetics, performance, and environments? And I have to ask that question, and so Roger Main provided me with, and Scott Radke provided me with this reference. Apparently this is the reference that is being used, vitamin levels in animal health, 1994. And those are the references as you'll see in the slides going forward. Okay? All right, so we invested research in 2 nursery trials, 1 grow finish and 1 sow trial, and I'll go over those trials with you. But we compared this, when I say standard, that would be our standard levels at United Animal Health, which are not that much different than the industry. If you look at and compare our values with Floor's values, they're about the same. Okay? And so if you compare that, so we compared that, we just cut them in half. 50%, all vitamins, cut them in half. What is the impact on performance and serum and liver values? That's one study. Second study, and this one really was in response to one of Dr. Ackerman's colleagues in the field who seemed to be getting some improvements in performance and reducing some issues and problems in the field by adding 25% vitamins. And so we thought, well, we needed to look at that. We're already pretty high. In fact, I would suggest to you that we're closer to the toxicity levels of A and D. We're a lot closer to the toxicity levels, according to NRC, than we are the requirement. But we're already pretty high, but maybe another 25% will help us. So that's the trial that we'll look at. We're also going to look at grow finish, in which we went above and below our standard values, 20% higher, 20% lower, 60% lower, and then 60% lower and then completely took them out, which is a little bit like a Kansas State trial did several years ago during the last vitamin crisis that we had, where they just removed the vitamins completely. So what happens to performance, serum, and liver values in those situations? And then we were about to repop some sows. We thought, well, this is a good opportunity to euthanize some sows so that we can take both serum and liver values. And so we looked at our standard values during gestation and one lactation and compared that to NRC. And so these are the trials that we'll review here. All right. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's just to show you that these are the values. These are our standards. This is 50%. It's a really pretty good sized trial. 18 reps, 30 head per pin. We initiated it. We didn't take the vitamins out of the pellets. Shame on us. It's to eat. We didn't want to do that. But we did start them the treatments 5 days post weaning. And then the 50% reduction was all vitamins, not just A, D, and E. Okay? So if you look at the performance, you see that we might have got a bit of a response in the first 9 days. There was a significant improvement in average daily gain in feed intake, but it was all lost by day 37, no differences in performance. Now here, I want to cue you in just a little bit because I don't want to take time to reference it every time. But if we're showing serum or liver values at any time, we always provide you with the reference, the Iowa State diagnostic reference. And so you can quickly compare this reference to these values and see that we're not even close. Not even close. That doesn't make the values bad. It just means that we're just not there. Okay? And so every slide that shows serum and liver has a reference. You can look at them, but at the end I have a summary slide. Summary slides on all of the serum and liver values. And so we can, if you miss it, we'll pick it up again. Okay? So here's the values for serum vitamin D. Obviously no difference in day 0. There was a significant difference in days 15 and 37, suggesting that if you cut the vitamins 50%, you'll affect serum vitamin D levels. This is serum vitamin A. No difference at day 0. Day 15 is trending. No difference here. In fact, for some reason, it's a little higher, probably just due to the variation. But in liver, vitamin A in the liver was impacted and significantly reduced at 50% of the vitamins. Vitamin E, no differences in serum and no differences in liver. Okay. And also, observations from the field said that the ribs were soft and pliable. So and the pigs that we sacrificed, we took ribs, sent them off to the Iowa State Diagnostic Lab, and we determined that the ash content was no different for 50% versus standard standard vitamins, and the density, although slightly lower than the reference, again, no difference. This is the study in which we did the increased the vitamin A, D, and E 25%. A, D, and E 25%. Another large study, 23 reps. The pin density was 4 head per pin in this particular trial. This is the growth rate. We see an improvement in no difference in average daily gain, but a significant increase in average daily feed intake. And by the way, that's the point that I want to make here, is that it seems as though as we increase vitamins either above 50% or even here at 125%, we always got an intake response. And you'll see it in our sows too, which is kind of odd. It never really resulted in improvement in gain, but there seemed to always be a kind of a general improvement in intake, which we weren't concerned. We were kind of concerned with. So, knowing more about. All right. So, a little bump in intake here carried over into the day 41. Vitamin D. Yes, you can affect vitamin D by increasing by 25%. There's the response in serum. Serum vitamin A and E. No difference in A, no difference in E. Here's our grow finish trial. I'll switch to this. So I guess for the summary of the nursery, we didn't get a big response in performance, a little bit of bump in feed intake, no differences in gain, and yes, we can affect serum and liver values. If that becomes important, we can do that through feeding different levels. Grow finish trial, 70 to market, 5 dietary treatments, 11 reps. There's the treatments. We have already gone through those. So here's the serum values. Generally speaking, this is a mistake. Sorry, that should be kind of a 160-pound time when we sampled. So week 2, about 160 pounds in market. And generally speaking here, the overall summary here is that if you remove vitamins, particularly 40% of the vitamins are removed, leaving only 60%, you can affect serum values. Sorry, I forgot one thing. There were no treatment differences in growth performance in this grow finish trial. So all the data I'm going to show you to save time is on the serum and liver. So generally lower value. Serum vitamin D generally a little lower, particularly at the 60% mark. And serum E also generally lower values. So yes, you can even impact serum values in grow finish pigs. Liver values, yes, you can affect liver values as well, as in these that we took at market. So now we're going to finish with a sow trial. We had 122 sows. Were put on either NRC values or standard values, our standard sow values. And then we took serum and liver samples from 48 sows and 1 pig from their litters. And that's the data I'm going to show you. Let me back up, sorry. We put these treatments in at least 12 weeks in gestation and all of lactation. That's an important concept I forgot to mention. No differences in total born, born alive, stillbirths, Birth weight, number weaned, wean weight. You might be critical if there's not enough sows there. That could be right, but we had quite a few, 122 per treatment. So that's quite a few. We did see, just like I'd mentioned, an increase in intake when we fed standard versus the NRC requirements. And then blood serum values were reduced or were less for the NRC. Vitamin A was not affected at farrowing or weaning when the blood's on. And these are sow vitamins. These are sow values now, and so we did get a reduction in liver in the sow. Vitamin E was not impacted. Oh, I guess just to be fair, it was at farrowing, but then not at weaning. And then those offspring took serum and liver values from the offspring and compared those. And yes, you could infect vitamin D in the offspring from sows that were fed NRC levels. Offspring vitamin A, serum and liver. Don't understand this, can't explain it. Why it's higher in NRC here. But no differences in liver. And offspring and vitamin E, yes, you can infect liver values in vitamin E of the pigs when the sows were fed NRC requirements. So here's the real thing that's got us all a little bit confused, and Dr. Main is very appreciative of the data. And so here's what I have here, and all these charts are set up the same. We'll go through them really quickly after I explain it. But this is the actual reference categories coming from the diagnostic reports. 1 to 4, 14 to 28, grow finish in adults. Each dot represents an average of the pigs that were samples that were collected from those pigs in that particular category. Okay? And the boxes are the ranges that the Iowa State Diagnostic Lab says that they should be to be adequate. And notice that for vitamin A, every one of those are all lower than the reference value. Serum D, all of the growing pigs were lower, but the adult was within range. Vitamin E was all over the board. Some were higher than the range. Some were pretty close. Some were lower. Liver, most were liver vitamin A were lower except for the adult. Liver vitamin E was the one analysis was high here at weaning, pretty much in the range for grower and adult. So we just want to remind ourselves that other things affect vitamins, vitamin requirements of the pig, production levels, health status, access to sunlight, mycotoxins, nutrient interactions. You can read the list there. There's lots of things that are involved, including body reserves. So the next steps, we think we should take this information and build on it. We're making it available to the industry. By the way, we're not the only ones that were sending off samples, not the only feed company that was sending off samples and getting them back as being lower than the reference values. So we're not alone in this, but I think we were the one that's maybe that, look, we can't keep doing this. We've got to at least get started on something to help the industry. I know that National Pork Board has recently provided some funding to Dr. Laura Griner at Iowa State, and she's going to take this data and continue on with it, which I appreciate. There needs to be some vitamin requirements. The NRC committee needs some help. But who's going to do it and who's going to fund it? That's the real problem. Vitamin interactions with health, performance, environment, nutrition have to be considered. We need some long duration trials with sows, and who's going to fund that? It's so expensive, and it doesn't really provide a lot of financial gain for whoever's doing it. Does it do any good to increase serum levels? I can't answer that question here. I think from a performance point of view, I don't think it does, generally speaking. But from an immunological point of view, maybe it does. I couldn't pick up. We didn't have those kinds of trials in place to really understand that. And we do need to, we being the feed industry, need to involve the veterinary community to help us understand how we can deal with this. And everyone that I've worked with has been so cooperative, so and I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to bring it to this very illustrious conference. Thank you.